In the early autumn of 1910, when fog still clung to the hollows of the Missouri hills, a small town named Dunmore's Hollow sat quietly by the river. It was a place where everyone knew everyone, and everyone feared what they didn't understand. Down by the edge of Main Street stood a narrow brick building with a faded sign that read, "Harper's Meats." Inside, the sharp scent of salt and iron hung in the air. Behind the counter worked a boy no older than 13, Eli Harper, son of the town butcher. Eli's hands were small but quick. His father, Thomas Harper, was a broad man with a permanent frown carved by hard work and loss. Since Eli's mother passed from pneumonia 2 winters ago, the boy had spoken little. But there was something else. Something that made even the church folk whisper when Eli passed. They said the butcher's boy could speak to the dead. The rumor started one night when old Mrs. Cottle's cat disappeared. The widow came crying to Thomas Harper's shop, asking for help. Eli quietly left through the back door, into the smokehouse where the moonlight leaked through the cracks. Minutes later he returned and softly said, "The cat's under the barn." She died in her sleep. They found her there, exactly as Eli said. Word spread faster than wind through corn stalks. By week's end, townsfolk stopped calling him Eli Harper and began whispering, "The ghost boy." His father scolded him that night, gripping his shoulder tightly. "Don't speak such foolishness, boy." "You hear me?" Eli looked up at him, eyes steady. "I didn't make it up, Pa." "She told me herself." Thomas's face paled. "Who did?" "The cat," Eli said simply. "And Mama sometimes." The butcher went silent. The only sound was the steady drip of blood into a pail. A week later, a man from out of town came to Dunmore's Hollow. His name was Mr. Gideon Price, a traveling photographer and journalist. He had heard of the butcher's boy and came seeking proof. He entered the shop with a polite smile and a camera slung over his shoulder. "I hear you've got a son who speaks to spirits," he said. Thomas scowled. "You heard wrong." But Eli, standing by the counter, simply said, "You lost someone, sir." Gideon froze. "What did you say?" Eli looked at him carefully. "A woman. She wore a blue ribbon. She says she forgives you." The man went pale. His hands trembled so badly he nearly dropped his camera. That evening, Gideon left town without saying another word. Every Sunday, the church bell tolled. Every Sunday, Eli sat outside instead of going in. The preacher said the dead belonged to God alone, but Eli didn't call for them. They just came. Sometimes they whispered things he didn't understand. A miner who spoke of a cave-in that hadn't happened yet. A soldier who begged him to warn his family before the telegram arrived. He carried their voices like weights in his chest. Thomas began to drink more. "This gift of yours, if it's real, it's a curse," he muttered one night. Eli stared into the fire. "It doesn't feel like a curse, Pa. It feels like someone still cares enough to speak." One morning, Widow Langley came to the shop. Her son had drowned in the river that spring, and she had never found peace. She looked at Eli, eyes swollen from years of crying. "Can you tell me if my boy's at peace?" Eli hesitated. His father shook his head firmly. "We're butchers, not fortune-tellers." But Eli saw the pain in her eyes, the kind that never slept. That night, after closing, he walked down to the river alone. He whispered her son's name into the dark current. A voice came back, a boy's voice, soft, like wind through reeds. "Tell her, it wasn't her fault." "I went after the dog." Eli delivered the message the next morning. The widow wept in his arms and thanked him. For the first time, Eli felt the weight of his gift as something holy. The story of Widow Langley spread through town. Some said Eli was blessed. Others said he was touched by the devil. Pastor Alden, a stern man with eyes sharp as nails, came to the butcher's shop. Your boy meddles in things not meant for mortals, he said. Thomas bowed his head. He's just a child. Then you'd best guide him before darkness does, the pastor warned. That night Eli's father prayed aloud for hours, but Eli sat awake, listening to the faint murmur of unseen souls just outside his window. Lonely, restless, waiting. He whispered back, "I hear you. I'll help if I can." Winter crept in early. One cold evening, a farmer named Reuben Sykes came knocking. He looked nervous, hat clutched tight. "My wife's been hearing things at night, voices in the cornfield. If your boy's truly what they say, maybe he can stop it." Thomas refused, but Eli slipped out after dark anyway. Under the pale moon, he heard the whispers too. A woman's sobs, tangled in the dry rustle of corn. "Reuben," the voice moaned, "you promised to tell them." Eli went back to the farmhouse, face pale. "Mr. Sykes," he said quietly, "you need to tell the sheriff where you buried her." The man's face drained of color. He confessed the next morning. The townsfolk said Eli had brought justice, but others whispered he had brought fear. The sheriff came by that week. He didn't arrest Eli, but he looked at Thomas with pity. "Boy like that ain't gonna have a peaceful life," he said. That night Thomas broke down. "I don't know how to protect you, son. I just want you to be normal. To live." Eli looked up at him. "Mama says you're doing your best." Thomas froze. His eyes filled with tears he hadn't shed since the funeral. "She talks to you?" "Every night. She says you shouldn't blame yourself for not saving her." Thomas covered his face with both hands. For the first time in years he wept openly. And for the first time, Eli held him instead of the other way around. A fierce storm rolled through Dunmore's Hollow. Lightning split the sky, and thunder echoed like cannons. The town lost power, and fear crept through every home. Eli awoke to hundreds of whispers at once, louder, closer, desperate. "Help us," they cried. "The water's coming." He ran outside in the pouring rain, barefoot, mud clinging to his ankles. "Pa, the dam's breaking," he shouted. Thomas thought it was just one of his episodes, but moments later the sound came, a deafening roar. The river's old dam had burst. Eli's warning saved half the town that night. Dozens of lives were spared because the butcher's boy had listened. But by morning, Eli lay in bed with a fever. The voices had been too many, too loud. For 3 days, Eli drifted between waking and dreams. He saw fields of golden wheat under a soft, endless light. He saw his mother standing there, smiling. "You did good, Eli," she said, "but it's not your time to stay." "Why me?" he asked. "Why can I hear them?" "Because you listen," she whispered, "and the world needs listeners." When he awoke, his father was by his side, eyes red from sleepless nights. "I thought I lost you," Thomas said. Eli smiled weakly. "You can't lose what never leaves, Pa." Outside, as the sun broke over the drenched town, the people of Dunmore's Hollow began to see the butcher's boy not as cursed, but as a bridge between the living and the lost. And somewhere in the wind that brushed through the Missouri hills, faint voices whispered their gratitude. Weeks passed after the flood. The town rebuilt, brick by brick, thanks in part to Eli's warning. But something inside the boy had changed. He was quieter, more distant. The voices that once filled his nights had fallen silent. At first, his father rejoiced. "Maybe it's gone, son. Maybe you're free." But Eli didn't smile. The silence felt heavier than the whispers ever had. He'd walked down the muddy road at dusk, looking toward the hills where the dead once spoke. One evening he murmured to the wind, "Where did you all go?" Only the rustle of dying leaves replied. A month later, Sheriff Clive came to the shop with his hat in hand. "Eli," he said softly, "there's a man missing. Samuel Ward, one of the mill hands. Went out last night and never came home. Your gift?" Saved us before? Think you can help again?" Thomas started to refuse, but Eli nodded. "I'll try." They went down to the riverbank where Samuel's coat had been found. Eli knelt beside the mud, closed his eyes, and listened. Nothing. Just the wind. Tears welled in his eyes. "They're gone," he whispered. "All of them." The sheriff sighed. "I reckon even miracles get tired." But as they turned to leave, a soft voice brushed Eli's ear. Upstream. Look for the lantern they followed, and found Samuel half-conscious, tangled in reeds, a lantern floating nearby. Eli had heard just one voice that night, his mother's. After the rescue, even Pastor Alden came to visit Eli. His stern expression had softened. "I misjudged you, boy," he said quietly. "What I called dark may have been light all along." Eli nodded but said nothing. The pastor hesitated before continuing. "I lost my daughter years ago. Scarlet fever. Every night I beg God to let me hear her voice again. But he's been silent. Do you still hear her kind of people?" Eli looked into his eyes and saw the same grief his father carried. "I don't call them, sir. They come when they need to be heard." A single tear slipped down the old man's cheek. Then maybe God's just using a different messenger. By winter, Dunmore's Hollow had healed. To celebrate, the townsfolk held a winter fair, their first since the flood. Lanterns swung from wooden poles, children laughed, and for the first time in years even Thomas Harper smiled. Eli sat quietly near the bonfire, sipping cider. That's when a little girl approached him, clutching a faded photograph. "Mister, my brother died last summer," she said. "Mama cries every night. Can you ask him if he's okay?" Eli hesitated, unsure if his gift still lived. He took the photo in trembling hands and closed his eyes. Then, faintly, he heard a child's laugh, the same as hers. "He says he's with the stars," Eli whispered, "and he likes when your mama sings to them." The girl smiled through tears. Her mother, watching from afar, wept openly. Eli looked up to the heavens, where snowflakes drifted like tiny souls. The silence was breaking again. That night, Eli dreamed of hundreds of lanterns floating down the river, each one carrying a whisper, a memory, a voice. His mother stood beside him once more, her hand warm in his. "They're not gone, Eli," she said. "They're learning to rest. Every word you carried helped them find peace." He looked at her, eyes wide. "Will you rest too, Mama?" She smiled sadly. "When you can forgive yourself for listening to the pain, then I'll rest." When Eli awoke, he felt something new, a deep understanding that his gift wasn't about hearing the dead. It was about giving peace to the living. Eli began helping in the shop again. But this time, Thomas noticed something different. The boy spoke kindly to every customer, especially the lonely ones. He delivered food to the widows, fixed broken steps for old men, and read letters aloud for those who couldn't. Word spread again, but not about ghosts or curses. Now they called him the Good Butcher's Boy. One afternoon, Thomas placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've done more for this town than any preacher or sheriff," he said. Eli smiled. "I just listened, Pa." That's all. Thomas nodded, eyes glistening. That's more than most men ever learn to do. Spring brought rain and green hills. One day, a familiar face appeared at the shop door. Mr. Gideon Price, the photographer who had fled town months ago. He carried his old camera and a letter. "I've been across the country," Gideon said, "telling people your story. Some don't believe it, but many. They write to thank you. Your words gave them hope." He placed a bundle of letters on the counter, over 100 of them. Eli's eyes widened. "Hope?" Gideon smiled. "The dead may have found peace through you, boy, but it's the living who found healing." Before he left, He took a photograph of Eli and his father standing together outside the shop, the morning sun warming their faces. That photo would one day hang in the town hall. In the summer of 1911, fever swept through the valley again. Eli was among the first to fall ill. He grew pale and weak, his breath shallow. The town gathered outside his home, praying, whispering, waiting. Thomas sat by his bedside, clutching his son's hand. "Don't you leave me, Eli. Not again." "Not you." Eli's eyes fluttered open. "Pa, if I go, I'll still listen, just like Mama did." Thomas broke down, shaking his head. "Don't say that." But Eli smiled faintly. "You'll hear me when you need to. You always will." The room filled with stillness, the kind that feels sacred. Eli passed quietly before dawn. The church bell rang 12 times. The whole town came to his funeral. Farmers, widows, children, even Pastor Alden. Gideon Price sent flowers from far away, with a note. Some lights never go out. Thomas stood at the grave, unable to speak. As the wind swept across the Missouri hills, it carried the faintest whisper, soft, gentle, unmistakable. "It's okay, Pa. I'm home." Tears streamed down Thomas's face. For the first time since his wife's death, he smiled, a trembling, broken, but genuine smile. Years later, travelers passing through Dunmore's Hollow would sometimes stop by the old butcher's shop. An aging man would greet them kindly. Thomas Harper, now gray but peaceful. He'd show them the photograph on the wall, a smiling boy beside him, sunlight in his hair. "That's my boy," he'd say softly. "He used to talk to the dead. But really, he just listened to hearts that had forgotten how to speak." And when the night settled over the Missouri hills and the wind whispered through the trees, some swore they could still hear a child's voice in the distance, warm, kind, and full of grace. "It's all right now. You're not alone.